The Alpha King posed as a beggar, while only the banished Omega offered him her cloak. The city, once golden with life and laughter, now trembled under the weight of the Alpha King's rule. Even in the dim light of the evening, the fear in every corner was almost tangible, as if the walls themselves whispered warnings to those who dared to dream of freedom. Leora moved quietly along the edges of the market square, her worn cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The fabric was thin, patched in places, but it was all she had. Her boots, once fine leather, were now stiff and cracked. Every step made her wince, yet she did not stop. She had learned long ago that stillness invited attention, and attention brought danger. As a banished Omega, Leora's life had become a series of careful movements and muted glances. The court had deemed her a troublemaker, a threat to the rigid hierarchy of the kingdom. She had spoken truths that others feared, and for that she was cast out. Her family had disowned her, and the streets of Urindor became both her prison and her sanctuary. The cold wind cut through her thin cloak, and she shivered despite herself. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, a constant companion that no dream of warmth could chase away. She passed the usual groups of beggars and thieves, their eyes hollow, their hands rough from the daily struggle to survive. None of them noticed her. They were too busy with their own suffering to care for another. Then she saw him. He was slumped against the wall of an abandoned stall, his shoulders hunched against the bitter wind. His clothes were rags, and his face was pale and thin, framed by dark, unkempt hair. At first, Leora thought he was another beggar, another shadow among shadows. But something about him made her pause. He was trembling, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, something unspoken. His hands clutched at his chest, and his eyes were closed as if he were holding back a storm of pain. Leora hesitated. She had learned to look away, to ignore the suffering of strangers because helping often brought trouble. But this time was different. A small voice inside her whispered that she could not walk past. Slowly, she approached. Are you all right?" she asked softly, her voice barely louder than the wind. The man's eyes opened, revealing a depth that startled her. They were sharp, intelligent, yet clouded with something she could not name. He looked at her, and for a moment it felt as if he could see into her very soul. "I cold," he murmured, his lips blue and trembling. Without thinking, Leora shrugged off her cloak. It was old and worn, but it was warm, and it was all she could offer. She draped it over his shoulders. The fabric fell around him, but his frame was so thin that it barely covered him. "Take it," she said simply. "It's not much, but it will help." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for a long moment said nothing. Then he smiled faintly, a smile so small and fleeting that it might have been mistaken for a trick of the wind. "Thank you," he whispered. Leora felt a strange warmth in her chest. She had expected fear, suspicion, or indifference. Instead, there was gratitude, fragile and honest, like a candle flickering in a dark room. "I should go," she said, stepping back. "Wait," he said, his voice stronger now, more certain. "What is your name?" She hesitated. She had been called many names: traitor, outcast, beggar. Her real name had been stolen along with her place in the world, but something in his gaze made her want to speak it. "Leora," she said quietly. "Leora," he repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. "It suits you." She blinked, unsure whether to feel flattered or confused. Who are you?" He shook his head and laughed softly, a sound that was more wind than voice. "Just a beggar," he said. "Someone who has nothing but the night and the cold, for now." Leora studied him. There was honesty in his words, yes, but also something that did not fit. His posture, though weak, carried a hint of strength. His eyes, though tired, held a spark that no ordinary beggar could possess. "Then you are lucky," she said finally, "that you met me tonight." She gave him a small, fleeting smile before turning to leave. As she walked away, she felt his gaze follow her. It was heavy, searching, almost pleading. She dared not look back. It was safer that way. The streets grew darker as she moved further from the market. Leora's mind wandered, as it often did, to what life might have been. She imagined her home, now silent and cold, the faces of those who had cast her out. She imagined a life where kindness was not a crime and where courage was not punished. But the thought was fleeting. Reality pressed in as it always did. Hunger, cold, and fear were constant companions. She pressed her hands into her sleeves and hurried on, her cloak a thin barrier against the night. Meanwhile, the man she had helped watched her disappear into the darkness. He pulled the cloak tighter around his shoulders, feeling the warmth seep into him. His eyes, sharp and calculating, lingered on the figure of the Omega who had shown him a simple kindness. A name formed on his lips, though he did not speak it aloud. Kalen, the Alpha King of Urendor. The title felt strange on his tongue, almost like a memory from another life. He had come to the streets that night to observe, to test, to see who among the forgotten and broken might have a heart strong enough to matter. And in that moment he knew. Leora mattered, but the knowledge came with a twist of fear. The court would never forgive her kindness to a man they did not know, or perhaps a man they feared too much. The streets were dangerous and enemies lurked in every shadow. If anyone discovered her act tonight, it could mean death. Kalen pressed the cloak to his chest, feeling both warmth and longing. He had hidden among his people for years, wearing disguises, listening to whispers, and testing loyalty. Never had he encountered anyone like Leora, someone who would offer comfort without hesitation, someone whose courage shone quietly yet fiercely. The wind rose, carrying the scent of smoke from the city's distant chimneys. Kalen knew he could not stay long. He must return to the palace before dawn, to his throne, his crown, and the weight of a kingdom that demanded everything of him but gave little in return. Yet even as he walked away, he felt a connection that would not be broken. The Omega with the kind heart had seen him, truly seen him, in a way no one ever had. And that vision would haunt him, linger in his mind like a candle in a dark room, guiding him toward a future he had not dared to imagine. Leora, unaware of the true identity of the man she had helped, found a quiet alley and leaned against the cold stone wall. She let herself breathe for the first time that evening. Her hands tingled from the chill, and her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the strange flutter of hope. Hope, she thought, was a dangerous thing for someone like her. It promised warmth in a world that was often cruel, and it demanded courage in the face of impossible odds. Yet as she wrapped her remaining cloak tightly around herself and stared up at the faint stars above the rooftops of Urendor, she allowed herself a small, daring thought. Maybe, just maybe tomorrow could be different. Far away in the shadows of the city, Kalen watched from a distance. He made no sound, revealed no sign of his presence. But he carried Leora's image with him like a secret treasure, a spark that could not be extinguished. He knew that their fates, though separated by the walls of the palace and the streets of the city, were intertwined. And so, the night settled over Urendor, quiet but heavy with the promise of change. The Alpha King in disguise had been noticed, and the banished Omega had made a choice, a simple act of kindness, that would ripple far beyond the cobbled streets she walked. Neither knew it yet, but a story of power, compassion, and hidden destiny had begun. And as the first pale light of dawn began to touch the towers of the city, the world seemed poised on the edge of something extraordinary. Cliffhanger. She picked it up, her fingers trembling. Written in a careful hand were the words, "Meet me at the edge of the forest tonight. I have seen you. I will not forget." Her breath caught. Who could know her? And why did her name feel like it had been called from the depths of fate itself? The forest edge was quiet as the sun sank behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the ground. Leora's heart beat faster as she clutched the folded note in her hand. The paper was thin, worn, and smelled faintly of smoke, as if it had traveled a long way to reach her. Every instinct in her body screamed that danger could be near, but curiosity and something deeper, A strange, unnameable trust pushed her forward. She moved carefully, her boots crunching softly over fallen leaves and twigs. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Shadows shifted between the trunks, and the forest seemed alive with quiet anticipation. Leora paused for a moment, listening. Nothing stirred, yet every rustle felt like a heartbeat, every sigh of wind like a warning. Then she saw him. Kalen stood at a small clearing, the cloak she had given him draped loosely over his shoulders. He had changed his rags slightly, smoothing the fabric to hide the dirt and damage of the streets. He looked ordinary, but there was a presence about him that was impossible to ignore, a calm authority that made the very air seem to bend around him. "Leora," he said quietly, bowing his head in acknowledgement. "You came." She swallowed, trying to steady the tremor in her hands. I wasn't sure," she admitted. "I didn't know who you were or if it was safe." "Safe?" Kalen's voice carried a faint laugh like the wind through the trees. "There is no safety for anyone in this world, Omega, only choices, and tonight you made yours." She frowned, uncertain. "Why me? Why call me here?" Kalen stepped closer and she noticed the faint scars along his hands and wrists, marks that hinted at a life far harsher than her own. "Because," he said slowly, "most people see only what I wear, the fear I carry, but you saw what I needed. That is rare. That is precious." Leora's cheeks flushed, but she kept her gaze steady. "It was just a cloak. Anyone could have done that." "Not anyone," Kalen said firmly, his eyes, dark and deep, locked onto hers, "and certainly not those who have been cast out. There is strength in you, Leora, more than you know." For a moment the forest held its breath. Leora wanted to argue, wanted to deny it, but she found herself silent. There was something in his presence, something that demanded honesty without words. Kalen studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he said softly, "I have a secret, Leora, one I cannot share lightly, but I will trust you because I see your heart." Leora's pulse quickened. "A secret?" "Yes," he said, glancing toward the distant city where the last light of day fell on the stone towers. "I am not who I appear to be. I am the Alpha King." Her breath caught. "The Alpha King," she repeated, her voice trembling slightly. "The one who rules Urendor." Kalen nodded, his dark eyes calm yet burdened. "I came here tonight in disguise to see my people, to understand them, and I came to see you." Leora stepped back, a swirl of fear and awe gripping her. The Alpha King, the man who ruled with iron and shadow, had been standing in the streets she knew, disguised as a beggar. And she had offered him her cloak, her first act of kindness in months, had been noticed. I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice small. "I am only a banished Omega, I am nothing." Kalen shook his head, his expression softening. "Nothing? Leora, it is the nothing who sees everything, the forgotten who remembers. That is why I am here. That is why you are here. You have a heart that does not bend to fear, a courage that does not bow to power." Her stomach twisted. She had spent her life hiding, surviving, hoping not to be seen. And now the man before her, the Alpha King himself, spoke as if he knew her, as if he understood every moment of exile, every shadow of shame she carried. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged, until Kalen stepped closer. "Come with me," he said, his voice low. "I will show you something. A place where you can see who I truly am, and perhaps where you can understand why I must rule as I do." Leora hesitated. Fear warned her to turn away, to run back into the safety of the shadows. But curiosity, that spark of hope she had tried to bury, pushed her forward. She followed him into the deeper forest, where the light dimmed and the world seemed untouched by human cruelty. As they walked, Kalen spoke softly of the city, of the burdens of the crown, and of the curse that had haunted his bloodline for generations. "The crown is not a gift," he said. "It is a weight. It isolates me, even from those I would call friends, even from those I would love. And yet I cannot abandon it, for the kingdom would fall." Leora listened, fascinated despite herself. She had never heard a ruler speak so openly, so honestly. There was pain in his words, yes, but also a sense of responsibility, a strength she could not ignore. "Why tell me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because," Kalen said, looking at her with something akin to vulnerability, "I trust you, and because you are not afraid to see the truth, even when it is uncomfortable." The forest grew darker as night fell. The moon rose above the treetops, casting silver light over the clearing they entered. In the center stood a small pool of water, clear and still. Kalen gestured toward it. "Look," he said. Leora approached and saw her own reflection, pale and delicate in the moonlight. Then Kalen stepped beside her, and for a brief moment their reflections merged in the water. "Do you see?" he asked. "We are both bound by the choices we make, by the paths we walk. And sometimes the bravest act is simply to care, to reach out, even when the world tells us we should not." Leora's eyes met his in the reflection, and for a moment the forest around them disappeared. There was only him, only the truth of his gaze and the strange, electric pull of recognition. She began, but the words caught in her throat. Kalen smiled faintly, understanding her silence. "You need not speak. Sometimes understanding is enough." A rustle in the trees broke the spell. Kalen tensed, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We are not alone," he said quietly. "Danger follows me as it follows all who seek power, and now it may follow you as well." Leora's heart pounded. "Danger?" she asked, though a part of her already knew. Being seen by the Alpha King could bring more than danger, it could bring death. Kalen's gaze softened. "Do not fear tonight. You have shown courage already, but be prepared. The world is not kind to those who act with a heart, and sometimes the heart is the most dangerous weapon of all." They remained there, side by side, the moonlight reflecting off the pool of water until Kalen finally spoke again. "Tomorrow, you will return to the city. You will walk among those who have forgotten you, and yet you will carry this night with you. Remember that kindness, courage, and truth are more powerful than any crown, any decree, any curse." Leora nodded, her fingers brushing the surface of the water. The image of Kalen's reflection lingered, stronger than any memory she had ever held. And then he spoke the words that made her breath catch. "I will find you again, Leora, not as a beggar, not as a king, but as someone who sees you, truly sees you, and you will see me." Her heart fluttered, caught between fear and hope. She had no idea what he meant or how it would come to be, but she knew one thing. Her life, once small and hidden, had just been changed forever. As she turned to leave, Kalen's hand brushed hers lightly, a touch as light as a shadow, yet heavier than any stone. It lingered in her mind, a spark that would not fade. The forest seemed quieter when she returned to the city, yet every shadow, every whisper of the wind seemed to carry his presence. Leora knew she had stepped into something larger than herself, a world of power, danger, and connection she had never imagined. The note in her hand had promised a meeting, but what it had truly delivered was a beginning, a story of courage, destiny, and hearts entwined by forces beyond comprehension. Cliffhanger. "But trust this, I am coming for you and the world will see you as I have." Her pulse quickened. The Alpha King had revealed himself once, but now the danger and the promise was real. And Leora understood that her life, and perhaps the fate of Erendor itself, had just become inseparable from his. The first light of dawn had barely touched the towers of Erendor when Leora awoke. The golden pin Kalen had left lay beside her, glinting in the morning light. Its shape, a wolf, proud and vigilant, seemed almost alive. She touched it lightly, a shiver running down her spine. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind. The man who was not just a beggar but the Alpha King himself, the pool in the forest, the words that had struck deeper than any sword. Even now, she could not believe it. Yet the pin was proof, something tangible that connected her to him, to a world she had never dared to enter, and she knew that world was calling her. By mid-morning, she had decided. She would follow Kalen's instructions and go to the edge of the forest that evening. Curiosity and a strange, growing trust compelled her forward, but the day was not without its challenges. The city streets were harsher in the light of day. Guards patrolled more openly, their eyes sharp and unyielding. Merchants shouted, selling wares and gossip alike. And everywhere whispers of rebellion and fear intertwined, like smoke rising from hidden fires. Leora kept to the shadows, careful to avoid notice. Yet even as she moved, she felt the weight of eyes upon her. Some followed, some observed, and all reminded her that the world she was stepping into was dangerous. As evening fell, the forest loomed ahead. Its dark silhouette was framed by the last glow of sunset. Leora's heart beat faster, but her steps were steady. The memory of Kaelin's gaze, full of both strength and vulnerability, guided her like a compass. When she arrived at the clearing, he was already there, waiting. The cloak she had given him hung loosely over his shoulders, but his presence was no longer that of a beggar. It was commanding, almost regal, yet tempered by a quiet humility. "Leora," Kaelin said softly, "you came." She nodded, unable to speak at first. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the forest itself had paused to witness this meeting. Kaelin's eyes, dark and penetrating, searched hers. "I need to show you something," he said. "Something that explains why I am the way I am, and why I cannot love freely without consequences." Her pulse quickened. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kaelin gestured to the center of the clearing. A circle of stones surrounded a shallow pit. Shadows clung to its edges, moving as if alive. "This is the place where my curse began," he said. "Long before I became king, long before the throne called my name. My blood carries a power, a protection for the kingdom, but it comes with a cost." Leora stepped closer, curiosity mingling with fear. "A curse," Kaelin nodded. "I cannot touch another being without risking their life. I cannot form bonds freely. The heart that loves me could die if I am careless." She took a step back, stunned. "But how can anyone live like that?" Kaelin's expression softened. "With great solitude, with great caution. And with hope when it comes unexpectedly." His gaze lingered on her, steady and unwavering. "You are that hope, Leora. Your courage, your kindness, the cloak you gave me. It proved that hearts like yours still exist, and that is why I trust you." Leora felt a strange mixture of awe and fear. The man before her was powerful beyond imagination, bound by a curse older than she could comprehend. And yet, there was a vulnerability in his eyes that drew her in. It called to the part of her that had longed for connection, for understanding, for a place in a world that had rejected her. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because," Kaelin said, taking a step closer, "most people fear power, even disguised. They act with selfishness or with caution. But you act with compassion. You are brave not because you must be, but because your heart will not allow you to be anything else. That is rare. That is extraordinary." Leora's breath caught. She had spent her life hiding, surviving, doubting her worth. And now the Alpha King himself spoke as if he saw her entirely, as if he recognized strength she had never acknowledged. The shadows around the clearing deepened. The air shifted, carrying a faint chill that made her shiver. Kaelin extended a hand toward the shallow pit. "Come closer," he said. "I will show you the origin of the curse." Leora hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution, yet something stronger urged her forward. She stepped closer, drawn by the gravity of his presence, by the promise of truth. Kaelin touched the surface of the pit, and the water within began to shimmer. Images formed, reflections of a time long past. A younger Kaelin, crowned and yet frightened, stood in a hall of stone and fire. A figure, cloaked and shadowed, whispered incantations that bound the power in his blood to a fate of solitude and responsibility. The curse was clear: to protect the kingdom, to wield strength beyond imagining, yet never to love freely without danger. Leora watched, transfixed. "So this has been your life all along?" she asked softly. Kaelin nodded. "A life of duty, of isolation, of careful steps, But now I see a path that might lead to something different if one is brave enough to walk it with me." Her eyes met his. "And if it fails?" Kalen's expression darkened. "Then one or both of us may pay the price." The weight of his words pressed on her chest, yet she felt no fear, only a determination that surprised even her. I will walk it," she said. "If it means helping you, helping the kingdom, I will face whatever comes." Kalen's gaze softened, but the shadows around him grew. From the tree line, faint movements emerged, figures cloaked in darkness, watching, waiting. The forest itself seemed to tense. "They are here," Kalen said quietly. "Those who would see the kingdom fall, those who would exploit the curse for their own gain. And now you are involved, Leora, but that is not a weakness. That is a chance." Her heart raced. The danger was real, yet she felt the spark of courage. Together, perhaps they could face it. Together, perhaps they could defy the fate that had haunted Kalen for centuries. Kalen stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tonight, I must reveal something to you fully. The curse is not just a story of danger, it is a test of hearts. And you are the only one who can help me meet it without losing myself, or you." Leora nodded, sensing the gravity of his words. "Tell me," she said. "I want to understand." He took her hand gently, careful, yet the touch carried a weight that made her pulse flutter. "The curse is bound to the bloodline of the Alpha Kings. Any bond I form, any connection, could be fatal. That is why I have never trusted anyone. That is why I have never loved. Until now." She felt a chill run through her, both from the forest and from the depth of his confession. To be trusted, to be chosen, was frightening and thrilling all at once. "You trust me," she whispered. "I do," Kalen said, his voice steady, filled with a rare vulnerability. "And I will protect you as best I can. But the curse, it will not forgive carelessness. You must be brave, you must be wise, and above all, you must be willing to face what comes together." Leora nodded again, her resolve hardening. She had been banished, underestimated, dismissed. And yet here she was, standing with the Alpha King, facing not just a curse, but a destiny that had chosen her as its witness. The forest seemed to exhale, the shadows shifting back, giving them space. Kalen led her to the center of the clearing, where the pit of water shimmered still, reflecting the moonlight above. "Here," he said, "is where the curse can be understood and perhaps where it can be challenged." Leora stepped forward. The reflection in the water was no longer just theirs. It showed visions of the city, of faces twisted with fear, and of Kalen, alone in his throne, a figure of both awe and sorrow. "The curse is tied to my heart," Kalen said, his voice low. "To love is to risk destruction. But to care, to act with compassion, is to find strength that surpasses even the darkest magic. That is why I brought you here. That is why you matter." Her breath caught. She had never imagined that a single act of kindness, giving a cloak to a stranger, could ripple into something so profound. And yet, here she was, standing at the edge of destiny, holding the hand of a man bound by ancient magic, feeling the weight of fate in every heartbeat. A sudden rustle from the trees startled her. Figures emerged, cloaked and moving silently, their faces hidden. Kalen stepped in front of her, eyes flashing. "They have followed me," he said. "They seek to use the curse for their own gain, and now you are part of it." Her heart pounded, but she did not step back. The forest seemed to hold its breath as they faced the shadowed figures. The air was thick with tension, a silent promise of confrontation, of choices that could change the course of both their lives. Kalen's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "No matter what comes, Leora, do not falter. Trust your heart, trust yourself, and trust me." The shadows moved closer, the night deepening, the first true test of courage and destiny arriving. Leora felt fear, yes, but also a spark of determination, a flicker of hope, and an undeniable connection to the man before her. And she knew, without doubt, that her life, and the fate of the Alpha King, would never be the same again. Cliffhanger. Leora's heart raced as Kalen tightened his grip on her hand. The forest held its breath. and the first battle of courage, trust, and fate had begun. The night had fallen completely over the forest of Urindor, wrapping the trees in a thick, almost suffocating darkness. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint smoke of distant fires. Leora's heart beat like a drum in her chest, each step she took carefully measured against the soft carpet of fallen leaves. Her hand was firmly held by Kaelin, whose presence was both comforting and intimidating. A king disguised no longer, a man burdened by power and a curse she barely understood. They moved through the shadows, guided by a path that Kaelin had walked many times, though it was unknown to her. The forest seemed alive, whispering secrets through the rustling leaves, as if warning them of the dangers ahead. She felt the weight of anticipation pressing on her chest, yet she could not turn back. "Are you ready?" Kaelin asked softly, his voice carrying both caution and reassurance. Leora nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I think I am. I have to be." He studied her for a moment, his gaze intense. "Good. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Remember that, Leora. Tonight it will be tested like never before." Ahead, a clearing opened, a circle of ancient stones, their surfaces etched with symbols that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The ground trembled slightly beneath their feet, and the air seemed to hum with a strange, magical energy. Leora felt a shiver of awe and fear. The stones themselves seemed alive, holding centuries of power within them. "This is the ritual site," Kaelin said, his eyes scanning the clearing for threats. "It is here that the curse can be confronted, but it is also here that the heart is tested. Every choice matters. One wrong step and the consequences could be irreversible." Leora took a deep breath. The words should have terrified her, and they did, but they also steeled her resolve. She had faced exile, hunger, and despair. She could face this too. Kaelin knelt in the center of the circle, drawing a pattern in the dust with a stick. The lines glimmered with faint silver light, and as he spoke words in a language older than the kingdom itself, the symbols flared, illuminating the clearing. Leora felt the air thrum with energy, a vibration deep in her bones. "You must be strong, Leora," Kaelin said, standing and holding out his hand to her. "Step into the circle with me. Only together can this ritual succeed." She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, a warmth surged through her, followed by a strange sense of clarity, as if the forest itself had acknowledged their connection. She stepped into the circle, feeling the magic swirl around her, wrapping them both in an invisible embrace. "Do not fear," Kaelin murmured. "Trust in yourself and in me." The air shimmered and shadows began to shift at the edge of the clearing. Figures emerged, cloaked in darkness, their faces hidden but their intent clear. They were here to challenge them, to exploit the curse, to test their courage. Kaelin's expression darkened and he tightened his grip on Leora's hand. "They are not just here to watch," he said quietly. "They are here to interfere. We must be ready." Leora's heart pounded, but she stood tall. "Then we will face them, together." As the cloaked figures advanced, the symbols on the stones flared brighter, reacting to the tension in the clearing. The first figure stepped forward, raising a hand that glowed with dark energy. Kaelin moved swiftly, placing himself between Leora and the threat, his own aura flaring in response. The air around him shimmered, as if the magic in his blood was waking from a long slumber. Leora watched, mesmerized by the display of power. Fear clawed at her, but she did not step back. She could feel Kaelin's strength, but also his caution, his concern for her. In that moment, she realized that his power was not just in magic or in his crown, but in his heart, his willingness to protect, to lead, to bear the weight of responsibility without faltering. The first attack came, a surge of dark energy that shot toward Kaelin. He deflected it with a sweep of his hand, the force scattering leaves and sending a shiver through the forest. Leora felt the pulse of magic in the clearing, and instinctively she raised her own hands. She did not know what she could do, but somehow the energy of the circle responded to her courage. A faint glow surrounded her, a mirror to Kaelin's power. "You are stronger than you realize," Kaelin said, his voice steady even as shadows moved closer. "Do not doubt yourself now." The next figure attacked, this time moving closer, the cloak of darkness swirling like smoke. Leora stepped forward, her heart steady, and the glow around her intensified. The magic of the circle recognized her bravery, amplifying her presence. Kaelin's eyes widened slightly in surprise and admiration. Together they faced the figures, their movements synchronized without words. Kaelin's power was fierce, controlled, and precise. Leora's courage fueled the circle, creating a shield that repelled the shadows. The dance of magic and willpower created a spectacle of light and dark, a testament to trust, courage, and the strength of the human heart. Then, one of the cloaked figures broke through the perimeter, moving directly toward Leora. She froze for a split second, fear clawing at her mind. Kaelin's voice rang in her ears. "Trust yourself, trust your heart." She remembered his words, the warmth of his hand, the courage she had carried all her life. Summoning every ounce of resolve, she raised her hands, and a wave of light burst from the circle, pushing the figure back. The shadows hissed, retreating as if burned by the purity of their combined will. The clearing grew silent, the forest holding its breath. Leora's chest heaved, and Kaelin lowered his hands, the glow fading. They stood together in the center, their reflections shimmering in the dust and stones, proof that they had faced the first trial and survived. Kaelin's gaze met hers, a mixture of pride and something softer, almost tender. "You were remarkable," he said. "I have seen courage, but tonight I have seen something more. You have a heart that does not falter, and that is why you matter to me." Leora felt a warmth in her chest, a connection that went beyond words or logic. She had feared this night, yet she had faced it, and in doing so had discovered strength she never knew existed. But the ritual was not complete. The curse still loomed, and the forest itself seemed to whisper warnings of what was to come. Kaelin approached a small stone pedestal in the center of the circle, placing his hand upon it. The symbols on the stones flared once more, brighter than before, illuminating the clearing like a silver sun. "Now comes the test of sacrifice," Kaelin said, his voice low, almost reverent. "This is the moment that will decide whether the curse can be challenged, whether the bond between us can survive." Leora's eyes widened. "Sacrifice? What must I do?" Kaelin shook his head. "Not yet. You must understand the stakes first. The magic here is ancient. It tests the heart, the courage, and the willingness to act for others. It is not physical strength, but emotional and moral strength that will determine the outcome." She nodded, though her heart raced. She understood now that the night was more than a trial of power. It was a trial of trust, of love, and of the choices they would make together. The shadows stirred again, smaller and more numerous this time, as if sensing the final stage of the ritual. Kaelin's hand found hers once more, their fingers interlacing tightly. "Whatever happens," he said, "we face it together. That is the only way the curse can be broken, and the only way you can remain safe." Leora met his gaze, determination burning in her eyes. "Then we will face it," she said, "together." The ground beneath the circle trembled as the shadows closed in. Leora felt a surge of fear, but also a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. Every lesson of her banishment, every act of courage, every choice that had led her to this moment converged into a single point. She would not falter. Kaelin raised his voice, chanting words older than the kingdom itself. The stones glowed brighter, their magic intertwining with theirs. Leora felt herself lifted, almost as if the forest itself was supporting her. She could feel the curse, not as a threat, but as a challenge to be met with courage and heart. A shadow lunged toward her, and instinctively she pushed back with all her strength. Light erupted, pushing the figure away. Kaelin's hand tightened on hers, steadying her, guiding her. The ritual's power responded to their combined courage. creating a shield that held firm against the encroaching darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shadows recoiled and retreated into the forest. The clearing fell silent, the air heavy with the aftertaste of magic. Leora and Kaelin stood together, breathing heavily, their hands still clasped, their hearts beating in unison. Kaelin turned to her, his expression a mixture of awe, relief, and something unspoken, almost tender. "You have done it," he said softly. "You faced the trial, you survived, and you proved yourself." Leora's legs shook, but she smiled, exhausted yet triumphant. "We did it," she corrected, her voice steady. "Together." Kaelin's eyes softened, and for a moment the weight of his crown, his curse, and his isolation seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet peace. "Yes, together," he agreed. But even as they stood in the moonlit clearing, a whisper of danger lingered in the forest. The curse was not entirely gone. The world would not forgive them easily, and the trials were far from over. Cliffhanger. Will the Omega protect the king, or will the curse claim them both? Leora's hand tightened on Kaelin's. Their hearts were bound by courage and trust, but the next challenge would demand more than bravery. It would demand sacrifice. The first light of dawn barely pierced the dense forest canopy, yet the clearing glowed with a faint, magical luminescence. Leora stood beside Kaelin, her fingers intertwined with his, feeling the weight of the night's trials and the uncertainty that still hung in the air. The shadowed figure from the previous night had vanished, but the sense of impending challenge lingered like a storm waiting to break. Kaelin's eyes scanned the forest edges, alert and sharp. The Alpha King was no longer a stranger to danger, but tonight the burden felt heavier than ever. The curse was still present, a whisper in his blood, a shadow over his heart, and he knew that breaking it would require more than courage. It would require trust, sacrifice, and the willingness to face what even kings feared. "You are ready," he said softly, though the words carried a weight of unspoken truth. "Whatever comes, Leora, we face it together. Only together can this end well." She nodded, her heart steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "I am ready," she said. "No matter what happens, I will stand with you." Kaelin gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Good. Then let us confront the final trial." From the shadows, movement began once more. Figures emerged, cloaked in darkness, their forms twisting and flickering as if made of smoke. They advanced silently, their intent clear, to test them, to exploit the curse, and to see whether the Omega and the Alpha King could survive together. Leora's breath caught, but she did not step back. Kaelin's presence anchored her, his strength flowing into her like a current. She could feel the magic of the forest and the circle responding to her courage, amplifying their combined resolve. "The curse tests the heart," Kaelin murmured, his voice barely audible over the tension in the air. "It is not about strength, but about choice. Fear can bind you, but love can free you." A shadow lunged forward, dark energy swirling around it. Kaelin stepped in front of Leora, raising his hands to shield her. Light flared from the circle, pushing the figure back. Leora instinctively joined him, raising her own hands. The glow of courage and compassion intertwined with Kaelin's power, creating a shield that repelled the shadows with every strike. The figures regrouped, circling them like wolves. One stepped forward, holding the glowing vial from the previous night. "The ritual is incomplete," the figure hissed, voice like ice. "The curse will claim the king. The Omega will falter. Only one can survive." Leora felt a chill run through her, but she did not let it show. She looked at Kaelin, seeing the unspoken burden he carried, the fear that the curse might destroy him despite his power. And yet she also saw something deeper. The man beneath the crown, the heart that trusted her, and the courage that matched her own. "We will not falter," Kaelin said firmly. "Together we are stronger than any curse." The figure laughed softly, a sound like rustling leaves. "We shall see." With a wave of its hand, the shadows surged forward, more numerous and aggressive than before. Kaelin raised his hands, summoning the magic of the circle. while Leora mirrored his movements. The glow surrounding them expanded, pushing back the darkness, until the forest itself seemed to hum in response to their unity. Suddenly one shadow broke through, moving directly toward Leora. Her heart raced, but she did not flinch. She felt Kaelin's hand guide hers, the warmth of his presence steadying her. With a deep breath, she focused on the courage that had carried her through every exile, every hardship, every trial. A surge of light burst from her, stronger than before, and the shadow recoiled, dissipating into mist. Kaelin's eyes widened in surprise and admiration. "You are incredible," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. Leora shook her head, smiling through the fear. "We did it together." The remaining shadows hesitated, sensing the strength of their bond. Kaelin took a step forward, chanting words older than the kingdom itself. The circle flared brightly, the magic responding to the courage, trust, and connection between the two of them. "This is it," Kaelin said, his voice low and reverent. "The final choice. The curse will ask of us what we value most. It will test the heart, the will, and the bond we share. Are you ready?" "I am," Leora replied firmly, her eyes meeting his. "Whatever it asks, I will face it with you." A heavy silence fell over the clearing. The air thickened, shimmering with unseen power. From the shadows, a voice emerged, cold and commanding. To break the curse, the Omega must choose. To protect the king, she must sacrifice herself or risk his destruction. Leora's chest tightened. Her first instinct was fear, but she drew strength from Kaelin's hand in hers, from the trust and care he had shown her, and from the courage that had carried her through every trial. She realized that this was the moment her heart had prepared for, not just to survive, but to act with love and bravery. "I choose," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, "to stand with him, to face the curse together." The shadows flared violently, swirling around them in a storm of darkness. Leora felt the magic pressing against her chest, testing her resolve, probing her fear. But she did not retreat. Her gaze stayed fixed on Kaelin S., and in that moment the curse itself seemed to recognize the truth of their bond. Kaelin's eyes shone with both relief and awe. "You are remarkable," he murmured. "Your heart is stronger than any magic, any curse. You have chosen wisely, Leora. Together we can overcome this." The shadows shrieked, twisting and thrashing, but slowly they began to dissolve, unable to withstand the unity of their courage and love. The circle glowed brighter, the magic stabilizing until at last the forest fell silent, the threat banished. Leora collapsed to her knees, breathing heavily, but Kaelin knelt beside her, lifting her gently. "Are you hurt?" he asked, concern etched across his features. "I'm okay," she said, smiling weakly. "We survived." Kaelin's eyes softened. "More than survived," he said. "You have proven that the heart, courage, and trust are more powerful than any curse. And in doing so, you have freed me, not just from the curse, but from the isolation that has haunted me for centuries." Leora's heart ached with relief and joy. We did it together," she said, echoing her words from the previous night, her voice trembling with emotion. Kaelin pulled her into a gentle embrace, careful and tender, yet filled with the strength of a king and the warmth of a man who had found someone who truly understood him. "Yes," he whispered, "together." The forest seemed to sigh in relief, the shadows gone, the magic at peace. The first rays of sunlight pierced the treetops, illuminating the clearing in golden light. It was as if the world itself recognized their triumph, honoring their courage, sacrifice, and bond. Leora looked up at Kaelin, seeing not just the king, not just the cursed Alpha, but the man who had chosen to trust her, to let her share in his burden, and to walk with him through darkness. "Kaelin, thank you," she said softly. "For trusting me, for showing me this world, even its dangers." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No, Leora, thank you, for showing me that even in a world of shadows and curses, hearts can be true. Hearts like yours are rare, and they change everything." For the first time, they allowed themselves to stand fully together. No masks, no disguises, no fears. The bond forged through trials, trust, and courage had transformed into something unbreakable, a connection that would carry them forward into a future neither had imagined. As they left the forest, hand in hand, the city of Urundor lay ahead, bright and alive in the morning sun. The challenges of ruling, the whispers of court, and the remnants of the curse's shadow would remain, but now they faced them together, united, courageous, and stronger than ever before. Kalen paused at the edge of the forest, looking down at Leora. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it side by side. You are no longer banished, no longer forgotten. You are part of this kingdom and part of me." Leora smiled, feeling a warmth she had never known, a sense of belonging and purpose. "And you are no longer alone, Kalen. Not while I am here." Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, every fear, every trial, every shadow melted away. What remained was trust, courage, and the quiet certainty that together they could face anything. The kingdom of Urundor would never be the same. The Alpha King had been freed from his curse, the banished Omega had found her place, and a bond stronger than magic itself had been forged, a bond that would endure all trials, all dangers, and all time. The sun rose higher, bathing the land in golden light, and for the first time in centuries, both Kalen and Leora felt the weight of the past lift. Their hearts, intertwined by courage, trust, and love, beat as one. And as the city stirred awake, none could foresee that the story of the King and the Omega, of courage, sacrifice, and the triumph of the heart, had only just begun.